Good morning, everyone. Welcome to everyone who signed up for our webinar this morning. I'm filling in for Joe Lombardo, our editor-in-chief. He'll be joining us shortly here in Singapore. And this morning, we are quite pleased to have Dr. Marco Tiemann, who's based in Malaysia, joining us in our webinar series. Rather than try and introduce him myself with his illustrious background, I'm going to hand it over to Marco now to actually give us an introduction about himself and what he's doing. Marco, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Raymond. First of all, very good morning. It's a great honor to be here speaking at this platform here today. So my name is Marco Tiemann, more than 15 years already in Malaysia. I come from Holland originally, and I'm the CEO and founder of LB International Consultancy Research and Supply Chain firm. So I'm also a professor at Help University, full professor doing research on halal supply chain management, and also a research fellow at the University of Malaya Halal Research Center. So do a lot of work throughout the region in areas of supply chain design, supply chain analysis, and also market research. We have offices in Holland, but also in Malaysia and Indonesia. So most of my work, I'm in Asia as well as the Middle East.
So I guess with the situation being what it is now, you've got to be very busy, yes?
Definitely. We are helping SMEs at the moment that are struck with this corona crisis. So like a doctor, like I'm doing now in my house, like a doctor appointment, you can book an appointment. So for SMEs to help them. So like a doctor, I learn what is happening and diagnose the problem and give recommendations to SMEs how to do, what to do next. As a lot of SMEs have problems to get out of this difficult situation.
So you know, that's great. And SMEs, I think, is a big focus for us. Can you give us a couple of examples around some of the typical issues you are seeing SMEs facing? And maybe split that into two parts. The first part is SMEs in Malaysia, but the second part is also SMEs in general, because you mentioned you've got an international career, you're working with SMEs in Holland as well. So one from a Malaysian context, because I think we've got a fair few listeners this morning in Malaysia, and also then to talk about an international context as well.
Well, as the lockdown created the global lockdown, unfortunately, the same problems you see here in Malaysia, also in other countries. First of all, when there's a lockdown, you see that companies have, first of all, cash flow problems. So a lot of industries like restaurants, coffee places, service industries, but also manufacturers, they had straight away zero revenue. A friend of mine, he is the owner of a coffee factory. His revenue went down by 90%. So he is supplying to coffee outlets. So it was a big consequence for a lot of companies. So the immediate thing that companies think is that they have a cash flow problem. But what at the end kills them is solvency and not necessarily cash flow. So what companies need to do is to, in urgent cases, to look at when the revenue is X'd away, which is what is happening now, is to relook at how to restructure my category. At 20% of your products or services give a revenue of 80% of your revenue. So you have to X also your category you're offering in the market. Secondly, your value chain has to be restructured. So which activities in my companies do really contribute to producing those 20% of those products that generate 80% of my revenue. So focus on those activities. those activities that do not contribute to that 20%, which gives you 80% of the revenue, you have to slim those down. If your revenue is X, you also have to start Xing in your company as well. Getting out most of your processes. So where are your bottlenecks now? Where are your bottlenecks in future? How best to protect those processes? And finally, work together. I mean, I come from Holland, a country where we like to work together, collaborate with each other, regardless if you are my competitor. We are now in a very challenging situation. We have to get together, work together, even with your competitors. We have difficulties in transporting. There's a shortage of warehouses in Malaysia, right? So we have to work together in order to deliver our supply chain to our customers. So these are challenging times. It has been regarded in Asian culture to not to work with your competitors.
Right.
Maybe we should relook at that. So there are now in these urgent times opportunities by collaborating vertically throughout your supply chain, but also with other supply chain networks that can save a lot of problems in your supply chains.
Indeed.
But Marco, your statements are very sound. Collaboration is not easy. It's actually seen as a non-competitive advantage, or even can lose your competitive advantage. In your mind, what are the factors or drivers that are needed now to enable this collaboration? Clearly, a mindset change is important, but how do you get that mindset changing?
Yeah, traditionally we had the mindset of economies of skill, economies of scope. We have now to look at economies of change, and the change are the supply chains, and we have to embrace the reality where we have to look at new partnerships that maybe traditionally we never looked at. So the traditional way of looking at economies of scale, economies of scope, that will need to be revisiting to economies of change. What are the logical partners now I should work with to deliver my supply chain? So synergies in supply chains will be important, but not the traditional synergies from economies of skills and economies of scope.
Right. But Marco, clearly our landscape is changing. Our customers have changed. Our suppliers are changing. We are changing. We actually are forced to change in all these circumstances. The mobility of people is now the constraint, because without the people, we can't make certain changes, adjustments. Financially, as you mentioned before, we are going to struggle because the economies are down. Money is going to be very tight. Cost of borrowing could go up, if you can borrow, that is. And therefore, there's a lot of parameters at play here. And it's quite a complex model, even for a big company, let alone a small company. And if you look at all these parameters, how do you get your head around looking at the people mobility, because those are your assets, looking at the financial capabilities, looking at your suppliers, some of them may have disappeared, some of them may be struggling, some of your customers which may have disappeared, some of them are struggling. How do you start getting your head around this and moving forward?
Yeah, you see people firefighting that are struggling with the lockdowns, getting the permits, to have the staff allowed to go to work. Other people are ignoring what's happening. They say we will survive that. We will go on after this COVID, and then we go back to what we did before. But at the end, I mean, a lot of your what happened, you know, it was a tsunami, and it came unexpected for many of us. And the complexity of this scenario, what happened in the COVID-19, was that it was a domino effect and the bullwhip effect that came together. So we think we had the big tsunami wave. No, there will be bigger waves coming after this. So now we see that the airlines are falling, all the other industries, sectors are disappearing, supply chain networks are connected. So the real big waves. So like if you're a surfer, a good waves comes in three, you know. We just had the first wave. And for a lot of industries, I'm worried that if you say after a few weeks, we give staff holiday and then we go back, there might be bigger waves coming because your supply chain has been damaged, has been disrupted. Your customers have changed. A lot of them might disappear. Your suppliers disappeared, have changed. So you have to restructure your supply chain, rethink what are the products and services I'm offering.
I'm glad you mentioned that.
Who are my partners?
I'm glad you mentioned that, Marco, because if you look at the chat group, someone was actually saying, yes, we're looking at collaborating with our competitors, right? Which is actually my premise of combined distribution networks. But also, what about collaborating more closely with our suppliers, you know? And maybe just to go off on a slight tangent here, you know, we're seeing that lean is not agile. We've always had this thing about lean supply chains and keep your costs down, keep your inventory levels low, but also increase your order size, etc., etc. So what do you say about that? Lean is not agile.
Yeah, you're hitting it on the nail, Dr. Raymond. You know, there was a religion in logistics that we had to go for
religion, yes.
Lean practices, also agile. And what the idea was that we created a kind of an athlete, a sportsman that was very strong. You know, Dr. Raymond, what we created was not a sportsman. We created anorexia patients. You know, we went too far. We created anorexia patients. So instead of the philosophy of lean and agile, we have to go to robust and resilience. So I think we used to preach as logistics experts, lean and agile. We have to go to robustness and resilience. Risk management will be very important in future. Where is the risk management departments of many companies? They're not there. There's no risk management. I do a lot of work even for multinationals. I look at the crisis manual. You know, they are not correct, they are not consistent and not complete. I'm sure that this scenario is very difficult to predict. It was not in crisis manuals, but we have to relook at risk management. We were focused in logistics and cost squeezing out, had the last dollar out of the supply chain. We looked at contracts with logistics service providers. We have in Malaysia, we have 1-year contracts with your 3PL or maximum 2-year contracts with your 3PL. This is unsustainable. Yes. Logistics service providers were not able to invest in their digitalization. They were not able to invest in digitalization. They were not able. They have very thin margins. Utilization of assets in logistics are very low. Trucks being used only 8 hours in a day. I mean, if you have a factory, automated factory, you utilize your factory for 8 hours per day, you would be dead financially. So those utilization figures has to go up also of the logistics industry.
So Marco, all very valid and good points, yeah? So as supply chain leaders, because you know we've got this close to 200 people on the chat group now, right, who signed up for this webinar. And most of them are supply chain leaders. I'm looking at their names and I know a few of them. So what do you think what role can we play in supply chain and change leadership in addressing these sort of challenges that you've talked about? All very valid. So what can we do as leaders?
I think it's good to make the logistics sector stronger. So I think the LogiSYM platform will be very important to bring the industry together.
Thank you very much.
Real together and start talking together. How can we work together? in business. How can we really collaborate in different areas, in asset utilization? So how can we make the logistics community stronger by working together? And yes, some of us are competitors, but you know, let's take that competitor head off of the moment. We all now need to survive. So how can we do this together? And if let's see each other as a family. You know, we are a family, we are friends, and let's see how we can get out of this together and give advice in platforms such as LogiSYM, work together, collaborate together, share assets, share transportation assets, warehouse assets, and help also SMEs with innovations also. Innovations in IT, but also new logistics concepts. Yeah? And we talk about new supply chains, I think, which is something of the future, that new supply chain models will need to be applied. Also, I believe for industries, in order to better protect themselves of lockdowns. This is the first time in history that a lockdown was done globally. So I'm afraid that a lockdown might come again in maybe in a few years again. So that has now been tested by a lot of countries. So that tool will be applied, guaranteed within the next 5 years again. So industries have to relook at what is my best location. Should I just go for a cheap piece of land to produce, or can I better put my factory in an industrial park, in a so-called green zone? So in case there is a lockdown required, that within that green zone, I can still manufacture. So I think also industrial development needs to be relooked at in order to protect supply chains, to protect industries from future lockdowns. As this could happen, I'm afraid it can happen within the coming 5 years again. So we have to learn how better can we protect our industries, including logistics, from future lockdown scenarios.
Marco, you're absolutely right to say that many companies have not got a business continuity plan or a risk analysis or risk assessment. And all the things that you're mentioning now about having redundant capacity or having diversified the manufacturing by having different land, different factories is part of a BCP. This is very clear. You mentioned earlier on about very lean margins in supply chain. You talked about being over lean and not having the capacity to actually defend any downturn or any disruption in the supply chain. But all of these things are music to all the logisticians and the supply chain people on call and to us in the industry. But where are the motivations to make a change? I have seen many CEOs, many business leaders not listening, not understanding, and going back to the old ways of managing the business, micromanaging and looking at components of where they feel safe and comfort. And what we are talking about is supply chains need a new science, a new dimension to move forward. And there is a resistance. Many opportunities, but there is a resistance to change because they don't know how to move forward. To the people who are listening, how do we break through this mindset of acceptance that change has come, change is going to be here, and we need to do things differently to succeed?
That's a good question. I think you have people that are asleep still in that lockdown.
Yes.
They are sitting at home, watching TV the whole day and hope that that storm will pass by.
Hibernating.
Yeah. So you have people that are asleep. Other people are firefighting, that just try to fix the ends by the end of today, that the machine is running. But it's good to realize to go to a helicopter view. I think logisticians, I have the ability to take a helicopter view, to understand what is happening and to draft an exit strategy for companies. And that there might be a reshuffle of logistic companies that try not to adapt to. It's important, I think, that you make change and see what are the opportunities. in every market change, every market shift, there are opportunities. But if you, stay in the old ways, it can be fatal. I mean, this is very unprecedented what's happening now. And not only cash flow can kill you, but also solvency will kill you at the end. So it's time to start restructuring. So what's your real focus? And diversification might not be a good strategy in this. I think it's important to have a laser focus on
Sure.
whatever you are doing now, and focus on those things that it can create revenue, and eliminate X, the rest away, which doesn't create revenue. Better outsource it. I mean, outsourcing is beautiful. Outsourcing takes it off asset of your books. It becomes variable cost. I mean, companies that can survive it better have lower assets, right? Than heavy assets company. Heavy asset companies are in trouble now. They're in trouble. They need to be rescued. Like in Holland,
That's right.
we have Air France, KLM. They need to be rescued. Heavy assets.
You're right in saying that we have to look at the opportunity. Sure. No, you're right to say there are opportunities, and there are very really big advantages of taking the opportunities. But you've been in the industry for many years. Someone in the supply chain 5-10 years ago required certain skills. Today, the skills have changed. Tomorrow, moving forward in this scenario, they will change again. What is your advice to people in this evolving supply chain business? How do we have to reposition ourselves, change our skills, sharpen our skills, and cope with the risks that we have, the recovery we have, but also take advantage of opportunities? Outsourcing is one. Outsourcing also has its advantages, but also risks. Repositioning manufacturing is one. But what is your advice to people in the current situation, in the supply chain now? What should they do to sharpen their skills, sharpen their outlook, to change and cope with the situation?
I think that risk management is important. So I think risk management skills have been forgotten. It was only about squeeze the dollar out of the supply chain. So I think, if I was a youngster getting out of the university, I would dive myself into risk management. I think that will be the new employment will be on risk management. Companies don't have risk management departments. I think that that will be a skill highly in demand. Also, purchasing. The subject purchasing is not taught very much. Purchasing has made a lot of mistakes in contracts, and supply reductions, which are fatal, have been fatal. So purchasing, I think, is an important discipline. What I'm very worried about in Malaysia, a lot of universities have gotten rid of the supply chain subject at MBA levels. I'm very concerned about development. I think one thing that Corona learned is how fragile are today's supply chain. So the supply chain expertise is needed at every MBA. Removing that from your curriculum, I think, is not a very wise decision. So hopefully supply chain comes back. The subject of purchasing is embraced at the university, as well as risk management, and that companies will set up a risk management department or function. I think that will be critical lessons learned, I think, and the way forward.
Thanks,
Could
Mark.
you elaborate a little bit on purchasing? Sorry, Ramon, if I can just ask the question. You brought purchasing in twice, Dr. Marco. What were the mistakes that you see happen in purchasing, and how can we fix those? Because that's a very important point that you raised.
The triggers, the motivation, in purchasing, the award, a purchaser gets the award when he makes a very good purchase deal, or often a discount. So the decisions made in purchasing are not always the decisions which are right for the company. So when we do analysis for manufacturers and on inventory practices, a lot of the problems, the cause of the problems was the purchasing department. So we have people in the purchasing department that are not well educated, and they are motivated by incentives which are questionable. So the incentive structures are often not correct, and the people in purchasing are not well educated and have not the right incentives there to make decisions, which cause a lot of problems. So also purchasing is an important subject by itself, which I don't see at universities, also not in Malaysia, to my grand surprise. I think as important topics that need to be educated to people, and also private sector can train those subjects. I think if universities fail to do that, I mean, then the private sector should intervene. I think in here, because these are the skills.
Then of course we then come to, are people willing to pay for it, for this intervention, the training and the capability development? Marco, so you've talked about a lot of very relevant things, yeah? And a lot of the focus on SMEs, but am I correct to say then that everything that you've talked about are also things that multinationals can look at?
Definitely, and I do a lot of work for multinationals, and on risk and reputation management, there are a lot of gaps with big multinationals as well. And SMEs have faced the music with this tsunami of that COVID-19, but multinationals at the same time. So if you are in a hotel chain, I mean, with hotels all over the world, I mean, suddenly all your hotels are empty. You know, it's so these kinds of disasters that are similar faced also for multinationals at the same problem at the bigger scale. The same problem. They also have cash flow problems. They also have solvency problems. They are too asset heavy. So they have the same problems because it's global. This was not an isolated case in China where this thing happened. It's now a global thing. So multinationals are not spared. They are not spared. They have the same problems as the SMEs and larger companies. The problem is the same.
Okay, thanks a lot. I've got quite a fair few questions here from our panelists. Sorry, not from our panelists, from our participants. So one of the questions was, you know, does this apply? How does it apply to larger companies? You've addressed that question. Another question that we had early on is, how can the government, what do you think government should do? Maybe start with the Malaysian government, do to help companies in the situation today?
Yeah, so what the government can do, I understand that you want to lock down people that are a high risk group, but to lock down industries, I think, was a big mistake that companies or governments have decided to do. I think to stop production has a lot of consequences. In Malaysia, there is a list so-called what are essential industries. So essential industries are allowed to produce. The rest is non-essential. But what isn't essential today and tomorrow can differ. So now you can argue, well, food is essential. But if I'm a maintenance company to a machine of the food industry and I'm not allowed to operate if my spare part breaks, of the machine breaks down, then the non-essential also becomes essential. So supply chains are interlinked together. I think governments don't very well understand what that supply chains are linked together into networks. And so if you come up with the idea of this is an essential industry and that's not, you're creating problems in supply chain. So it's just a matter of days that all the supply chains come to a total standstill. So I think lockdown of industries is very, very dangerous, will lead also to shortages of food supply chains. We have farmers that have difficulty, for example, harvesting. We have the asparagus season in Europe, so we can't get the farmers because they're not allowed to travel from Eastern Europe, so we can't harvest asparagus. So asparagus production is there, but we can't sell it because we can't pick it. In UK, they are throwing milk away. They are first milking the cows and they throw away the milk because the milk was destined for the coffee shop, which lost 90% of their income. So we are throwing away milk now. So the implications is very severe, leading to food shortages in time. I mean, in supermarkets. So the consequences of industrial lockdowns, I think, was a big mistake by governments.
Yeah, but I think to be fair, I've been monitoring the COVID-19 situation in different countries. It's caught a lot of governments off unprepared. So the exact path to take might be a bit of a challenge as well. Yeah. Joe, you had a question, Joe?
Yes, Marco, you're absolutely correct. Many companies and even the governments have been caught unprepared. And it comes down again to the issues of BCP, the vision, etc. And today, as you said, and also some of our listeners are commenting, yes, food's going to be in short supply, then leave things open. But the question is, leaving things open can promote another wave of pandemic, which can have an even bigger effect. So are we really learning? Are people really learning from past experiences? And the answer has to be probably not. If we go back to the days of SARS and the H1N1, where we had also an impact of coronavirus and people mobility was curtailed, did we really learn anything, Dr. Marco? Did we take those lessons and put them into our BCP? Did we actually refocus on our supply chain risks? Or has it just gone in from one year and out from the other? Because I see even big multinationals have not taken the lessons on board. What is your view on that?
I think the last crises were isolated, were not global. We had some regional, of course, crises, health crises. Yeah, I'm sad to say, I don't think that we have learned much. And now the scale is much bigger. And it's still about squeezing the dollar out of the supply chain instead of putting proper risk and reputation management practices down in smaller and also multinational companies. I think risk management is still a concern, a lot of gaps. So we have to get rid of the philosophy of lean and agile and to move into robust and resilient supply chain. So hopefully this big crisis, we finally learn something. And it is, I think, the most painful crisis we have ever seen for people. Now the people on the steering in the companies, steering the companies are all people after the Second World War. So this is unprecedented, it's never seen before for the people that are now in control for businesses. So yeah, this is the big.
So Dr. Marco, Dr. Marco, clearly we are in the crisis and everybody's in a crisis and maybe some people have not realized how deep in the crisis they are. But what would be your three top priorities to help companies ride out of this crisis? What are the three most important things we've got to do now? Yes, BCP and second location for manufacturing would be interesting, but now we need to survive. The top three priorities you would advise small or big companies to focus on.
Yeah, so I would look at categories. So what are the products I should be offering? Together also with the customer, see how we can co-create new products and services coming out of this. Second area is purchasing. So relook at purchasing product specification. How can we best collaborate with all the partners in the supply chain? And supply chain management. I mean, supply chain management should be higher in the board of directors, chief supply chain officer, and also use supply chain experts, use supply chain consultants. I mean, you need all the best team to get out of this. So use the expertise of supply chain advisors to get out of this crisis. You need the best team to do this right and to minimize your losses and to make the best decisions. So it's all hands on deck, I guess, and full steam ahead for everybody.
Right. Okay.
Marco, some excellent points. We've got a very active audience in the chat group. I'm not sure if you've been following it. Yes, and we've got one question from Bala. Bala, could you ask your question, please? Bala Subramaniam.
Can't hear him.
Otherwise, you can make.
Maybe
you can ask.
Okay.
Can you read it
So
out?
his question is up. He's on. Bala, please, over to you.
Could you hear me? Could you hear me now?
Yes, we can, Bala.
Yeah, good morning to all of you because it's quite early. I'm 4 hours behind you in Dubai. One of the things I brought up to Raymond was in these real tough times, one education all our youngsters have already learned is they have physically witnessed COVID-19. They know what a lockdown means. They know what every train stops means. They know what every factory closes means. Is this not the best time to the college kids and those who are coming out to be initiated into supply chain and sensitize them to it? They could become future leaders who could have the best solutions, which Marco has been talking, Joe has been asking the 3 questions. All those things might work. Number 2, resilience was a point which was talked about a lot in this webinar, which is very correct. That resilience to build up, you need a mindset. Certain times, an old mindset with certain comparisons to past. Oh yeah, there was a Gulf War, I came out immediately. There was a 2008 financial meltdown, I came out. But this is not that apple. This is a different orange. So that to get, I would strongly urge initiation of good youngsters into this. That would be a great service we'll be doing to the whole world and industry. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your comments and question. I think on education, yes, we have to create a new generation of logistics experts. So I hope that we can make the subject of logistics and supply chain management more sexy, appealing for the new generation of students. And I'm sure that coming out of this crisis, there will be a lot of new case studies and lessons learned that are valuable to create more robust and resilient supply chains and create a new focus. So instead of low margins in logistics, I think that we see logistics providers as true partners, allow them to digitalize their operation and utilize, create bigger utilization of logistics assets. Yes, in terms of resilience, that's something that is a mentality, what you correctly say, a culture change needs to be required. I think the importance of supply chain management should be at board level. So there should be a position as a chief supply chain officer in companies to get it, the topic of supply chain management higher in decision makings instead of just one of the departments.
All right. Thanks, Marco.
Okay.
We have another question from Sanjay. Sanjay?
Hey. Yes, good morning. Good morning to Marco, Dr. Ray, and Joe. My name is Sanjay Desai. How you guys are doing today? You guys are doing wonderful. Quick question. Dr. Marco, if for the last 10, 15 days, right, as I've been hearing news on TV and everywhere, there's one word that speaker always use. And it seems that suddenly the world has figured out that supply chain is so important. Now, coming to that point, do you think, is it going to change the agenda in the boardroom and the CSCOs are actually going to get a prominence and supply chain is going to be the top of the risk assessment now and right in the beginning, not as a financial exercise, but something which is really practical? Do you think the world is really going to change?
Well, I think, Sanjay, thanks for your comment. I think, yeah, the only time will tell us. Definitely risk management will be looked at. How do we organize our supply chains? You've seen already in the news that people say, well, maybe to get all our manufacturing out of one country, If it is China or Bangladesh, might not be a good idea. So I think supply chain networks, I think, will be questioned by top management, that's for sure. So supply chain networks will be questioned, and I think risk management, I hope, will be picked up,
Yes.
and also be yeah, more central in decision making.
Thank you.
Dr. Marco, so basically we've had a very good discussion going right around the world. Now let's just talk about what should we think about post coronavirus. What should we do in 6 months, 9 months down the road, apart from accepting the realities of perhaps a new normal? Perhaps the new normal is the way we do things. Accepting that a new normal will change our lives or change the way we do things is a reality, right? Whether you like the word or not, things are changed. Mobility of people mobility is key to our success, to our survival, to our recovery, to our restart. But until we have a vaccine that puts us all in a very safe environment, we are going to be still dislocated and disrupted for at least another 12, 18 months. Would you agree with that approach? And what would be your advice looking down the road in a potential new adaptation of the world we're in?
Yeah, I'm not a medical doctor, so I can't give any comments on the use of a vaccine. What I can say though is that I think it's good to look at the impact what it has done, the new reality in terms of your customers, in terms of your suppliers, and how best to organize your supply chain network. Look at collaboration, so leverage horizontal collaboration with competitors. Look at vertical collaboration within your supply chain to enhance that. So there you can create those synergy advantages in supply chains. Do proper monitoring. So have a dashboard like in a car. You have also different meters. So get your cockpit of your supply chain, get it ready. Do you have a supply chain control tower to monitor your supply chain, that you can react faster, that you can faster isolate issues, identify and share information with your supply chain partners. So I certainly think that digitalization will be an important theme. Collaboration will be an important theme, and also the greening, which started already earlier, to create more sustainable supply chains as well. So I think these are important topics, I think, for every industry, including logistics as well.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, Dr. Marcus. So if I can just summarize a moment, it's been a very interesting chat with you, Professor Dr. Marco Tieneman. Some very good questions from the audience. Thank you to Ramon for your facilitation and inspiring comments. So really the message you're leaving us, Dr. Marco, is focus now on robustness and resilience versus lean and agile. Focus on collaboration. Collaboration is a very, very important word that you have used time and time again. You have emphasized repeatedly the power and importance of purchasing in terms of negotiating as part of the collaboration, but also looking at the right decisions and the right methodologies and the skills in getting the right decision. We talked about education levels. We talked about supply chain expertise, the best teams for the job, and then looking at setting up the dashboard to ensure that we have the monitoring and continuous adjustment and tuning. Clearly, you touched very briefly on digitalization, because digitalization, automation is going to be part of the long-term solution, quite rightly, and that's a big subject in itself. And again, continuous engagement with suppliers and customers on collaboration. Have I summarized that clearly, Dr. Marco?
Excellent, well done. And I think education, continuous education, I think is important. You need to achieve supply chain excellence, and an important foundation of supply chain excellence is education.
Excellent.
Get new knowledge, and also to strengthen supply chain decisions.
Okay, excellent. Well, Dr. Marco, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate your insights. And let's hope the next time we meet, we will have overcome these challenges. I would like to thank all the participants who have connected, taken the time to connect. I hope it's been interesting for you. Thank you all for your questions, comments, and the 2 questions we've had from our panelists. Thank you to Ramon and also Mile in the background for connecting us to the webinar. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Dr. Marco. Have a good day and stay safe, stay well to everybody.
Thank you very much. It was a great pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.